craftsmanship and learn a lot about theory, structure, lines, flow, positive space and negative space. Is something that actually you probably know when you talk about art and looking at a canvas, so that means, what is in the background and what is in the foreground. I think in my case, once we know all of that, and probably happened to all the composers, then we let go because that information is inside already. And then we actually, go into the freedom of putting on the paper as much as we can, even that whatever is in the paper is not actually indicative of the style or how it should be played. Or even if we put all kind of dynamics there and instructions and everything, every human being is different. So every interpreter is going to interpret whatever they see differently. And that's why we have nowadays, 5 million recordings of Beethoven Fifth Symphony, because everybody just that got in love with it and had the possibility of having it recorded have made the recording. So that's all I have to say about my music. And I multi-stylist because I sometimes use traces of my primary culture. I come from the Caribbean, I speak Spanish, and I grew up and was born in the island of Cuba. And Cuba has a melange of music that is actually indicative of a lot of influences, the influences of the Amerindians, traces of Amerindians, which are the Indians that were there before the Spanish colonization. Then we have the Spanish, then we have the Africans, and we have the Asians that actually came at the turn of the century, between 19 and 20th century. No, 18th and 19th century, So, all of that became sort of like a lambalaja, it's, that kind of food that you actually put everything inside, and then you come up with the result. And that's what Cuban music is all about. The result of the confluence of all those communities of different cultures that dialogue and came out with something even better than what was there before. So I'm a product of that when I want to actually visit my roots, my musical roots. However, I am more or less more global. For example, now I can write jazz because I have been here for a long time. And it is something that I have been actually in touch with since I arrived. So that doesn't mean jazz. Same thing, influences of jazz that you can actually trace in some of my pieces. The one that reflects that is the last piece that I wrote for orchestra, not recently, but 2 years ago, called Stride. And it has a lot of, you can hear these American music influences sort of like appear and disappear, throughout the piece.
I know you've talked before about the impact of hearing jazz when you first came to the United States, music that you didn't know, some of these pianists that you had never heard. And do you remember then this process of globalization, or is it something you've always been aware of, or are you more aware of it now?
No, I didn't know that I was being prepared for that. My family is comprised of people of 3 different cultures. And that was for me, I don't know, it was natural, to jump from one kind of music to another, to hear or to learn several traditions of the different cultures of my family members. And they really didn't talk about that because, they were not vested in that kind of configuration. And my neighborhood was almost similar. Everybody was from different places. And due to migration, in other words, my family or the generation that preceded me was born in Cuba, even that their parents came from different places. And for me, it was no problem, to be dancing Spanish dancers, dancing, or dances, in Spanish dances, and to actually jump and go to ceremonies where African drumming was happening, or end up, in Chinatown, because of one of my grandparents, and dealing with Chinese food in the making. So it was no problem. I thought that the world was like that. So when I came out, or when I travel outside of Cuba, I think that one of the best things that happened to me is that I end up in New York, because in New York, I found the same melange of people, different languages, different traditions, different looks, and since then I have been here. What can I say?
Yeah, that's a very interesting juxtaposition, can we say, between what your family life was like in Cuba and your musical life, and then this change. But then now, as you're pointing out, some kind of similarities too. I want to ask you about the piano, because many of the students who are here with us this morning are pianists. And I know that you're a pianist, and you started out your musical training really focused on classical piano music.
Yes. In fact, when I arrived here, I have graduated as a pianist. I have won 3 competitions already. And I was not coming to the States. I was going to use the States as trampoline to go to Paris, because my training is French, with solfège from day one of my life in music. And I wanted to go to the Paris Conservatory to actually continue my post-grade. And I wanted to also meet Nadia Boulanger, because since, I was a graduate in solfège, I wanted to actually be able to actually expand my knowledge with her. But I don't know, destiny brought me to the United States. And it was a moment where the country I was born and the one that adopted me were in conflict. So I was not able to leave the States. And within the year of my arrival, I met a man with a project in mind that he actually heard me play the piano, and he invited me to collaborate with him. And that was the birth of the Dance Theater of Harlem. So therefore, I never went to Paris. I stay here. And that's how I actually started writing these pieces for the ballet that sent me to NYU to transfer my main point, which at the time was validating my degrees from Cuba. And I transferred then from piano to composition, because I needed to learn, composition, if that was an opportunity that was given to me then. And that's how the whole thing started. Yeah.
Is there something about the discipline, the structure of studying classical piano music that kind of prepares you for that kind of thinking, do you believe?
Well, before I left Cuba, I did some essays or assignments that my harmony teacher gave to me. And when I gave him my assignments, my teacher said that they were not really assignments, that they were pieces. And in fact, in this last CD of mine, piano music that came out, I decided to include those 3 excerpts, or those 3 little pieces that my teacher declared that were not really an assignment. And the thing is that it was my teacher, the one that said at that time that I was leaving. He knew I was leaving, and he said, Cuba may leave a pianist and gain a composer. He was the one that predicted I was going to be a composer when I really didn't think about it. It was not in my plans. However, when I was studying the piano, I had the tendency at home to transfigure the pieces and create my own arrangements of the pieces. I am an improviser also. And, sometimes I like the piece so much that I would create my own version of the piece. And I didn't know that this was going to be something that it was going to actually send me to the world of composition. Because it was something that it was not in my mind. And in fact, I was not even that involved about composers. I didn't know composers as much as the one that I was studying, but I knew their pieces. I didn't know that much about their lives. And as far as composers for the United States, I knew Leonard Bernstein because I saw clips of West Side Story on television. And I knew Aaron Copland and Gershwin. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, that's not that surprising, but that's fascinating.
Yeah,
amazing, actually.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the work you did with the Dance Theater of Harlem and this beginning of your redirection towards composition, it makes me wonder, because I think still some people see the work of the composer as an isolated thing that happens alone somewhere in a room, and you're kind of creating your masterpiece and handing it down to the world. But I have this feeling that always with you, there's collaboration in one way or another, that you're always working with or off of something else.
Yeah. Well, at Dance Theater of Harlem, of course, I was surrounded by all of these ballets, all the dancers. Of course, I would come home, and compose. But I was very nurtured by everything that was actually around me. And besides that, I was absorbing for the first time, hands-on, the culture of the United States, because the dancers were from everywhere. Sometimes from abroad. And the dancers were dancers. So that means that before we go to a party, they would show me or make me learn the steps, of the dances of the time. And being in Harlem, I learned to eat soul food. And plus, at Dance Theater of Harlem, it was such an event at the time that these incredible artists started coming in to coach us. And one of the first people that was working with us was Cicely Tyson. And then, you had Harry Belafonte around, or Lena Horne, or Leontine Price. All these people started coming and talking to us and sort of like giving us advice and helping us shape, artistically speaking. So it was very, very exhilarating and very inspiring, because I didn't know these people existed. It's like I didn't know when Arthur Mitchell approached me who he was. And I found out because he gave me a ticket to Lincoln Center. It was the first time I went to Lincoln Center. And I saw him on stage. And I read the program, at least, I saw the picture, because my English was not existent at the time. Even that, he heard me play and he talked to me, in other words, about joining him. And that's how I found out who he was. And then, of course, we had all these different ballets that we started rehearsing. And that's how I met Balanchine, and then Jerome Robbins came working with us, and Jeffrey Holder. It was just amazing. Amazing.
Do you think it's better if music has a function, a purpose like that? Is it easier or different to be engaged as a composer if there's some actual use for what you're doing, as opposed to just some absolute piece that's by itself?
Well, I don't know, because the reason why I'm in music is because my grandmother saw me with the radio at home, flipping into the stations, and every time that there was something musical, I will step away from the radio, dance to that music, on the beat of the music. She was amazed. And then sometimes I will repeat whatever they were saying. I would sing too, with the pitches of what I was listening to. So that's why she took me to a conservatory. She said, I think she has something to do with music. So for me, music is functional. Yeah, because I might conduct, Stravinsky, play Debussy, but I dance salsa, you see? And the thing is, music for me is tremendous. If I'm happy and I don't have anybody to dance with, because I grew up in a dancing country, I grab a broom and start dancing with the broom because movement and music for me are equal. I mean, there's a symbiotic relationship between both that I feel. And that's why, I don't even demark music. I don't call folklore music. I don't call it classical music. I don't call it, popular music. I think that music is functional because it's serving all kind of communities, and it's a human a human form of expression. You see that that shouldn't be categorized as high or low.
Something you said earlier really struck me. You said that you could be writing salsa or you could be writing for a symphony orchestra, and you love to do both of those things.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I love writing for the orchestra and seeing the musicians, playing the piece and whether I conduct the piece or not. I mean, they get vested into, they ask me questions and, and sometimes they say, oh my God, this is too hard, And,
I have a few questions now that I want to ask you that came from our students. And one of them comes from the person who's going to play your piece, actually. And that's a question about your piano piece, Ritual. And the question is this piece that's called Ritual inspired by some actual ritual?
Well, let me tell you something, okay? I mean, we call it ritual in English and it's ritual in Spanish, which is actually how I thought about it. And of course, there's a ritual there. At the beginning, this very sparse, there's sort of like an incantation, you see, that then it sort of like it's like an engine, starts sort of like moving and forming into a much more cohesive phrase, a musical line, and then until actually strikes into. You could think of, let's say, if you're watching fire and you see the embers jumping, that could be that. You could actually even think of a conga drummer with many, 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 many drums, jumping from one drum to another. You can think of so many different things, and the ritual is that the whole thing begins with perhaps bang, 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 right? So in other words, right there, you have the first gestures of that sort of like form of wild dance that becomes later on, are from one extreme to another extreme. And I don't know about you, but be careful every time that you play the lowest of A, the pitch A, so you don't bump your hand against the wood of the last note of the piano. You see what I mean? So, yeah. And I wanted to actually have those extremes. And let's assume that he's a dancer that has actually springs on the shoes, and every time that actually springs, it goes to another place. And that is actually that type of ritual that is happening with the hands, is happening with the sound, is happening.
So it's not only sound, it's also the physical making of the sound.
It's very physical. The piece is very physical. And I really, I'm very grateful that you have taken the challenge of playing this piece. The first person that played it, it was actually, debatable if the piece was going to be played or not, because I was told that this piece is unplayable. Nobody can play that. And now, look what is happening,
Yes, I think a lot of people have been playing it now, but it's great to see that. You already hinted at this But there's another question here about the indications that you put into your written music and how specifically you hope performers will follow those instructions. You said before there are many different people, so every interpretation is going to be different. But can you?
Yes. Well, one of the things is that, the challenge is that if the pianist can actually gradually increase the speed until the end, so it collapses. And that is actually what happened with rituals in many cultures. I mean, for example, if you actually witness the kodo players, in Japan, they start very slow, doom, 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 and then they start increasing until it becomes almost frenzy, and that happens in many dance forms, sometimes. In drumming of many other cultures, sometimes, and that is something that is indicative of that incantation, that happens at the end, until, I mean, there's a moment where the whole thing is going to stop, so then the whole thing collapses, and that is what I was aiming. The indications have to do with the following. If you realize that the entire piece is written in 6/8. Once you start that segment, that I told you that goes into the actual ritual, with the exception of there are some moments, where I may do, sort of like a 6/8 against 2/4 or something like that. There's a moment that it really go a little bit crazy, before going to what I call the coda, that actually send the piece off. And what is happening is that, yes, it's ternary, is 6/8, but our tendency to do 6/8 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You see, always being very methodical, that the accents are on the points of stress. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, yeah? But in my case, I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, So in other words, the accents are shifting constantly, you see?
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I think that, at least for me, makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, okay, there's a purpose to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the waltz, for example. But remember that if you went into mazurka, it was different. And, the accent shifted. Okay, was constantly on another number. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, So it's the on the second of the ternary. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, So it's constantly on the third. Yeah. But in my case, it's shifting constantly. Yeah.
I often have the impression that in European classical music, as it developed, that the most interesting, the most expressive moments are always irregularities which come into these patterns. And it's true of pitch as well, that somehow you have some expectation of regularity, and then maybe the composer does something to frustrate that expectation, and that's the most beautiful thing that happens.
Yeah, I think that it has to do with improvisation, because you might be regularly doing something methodically, and then all of a sudden it might be something that you think is a mistake, and it was not a mistake, but it becomes very attractive. Mm-hmm. Or something that you all of a sudden feel that you have to do differently, and you just put it there, regardless of what anybody's going to say. And so this is what have actually pushed, the act of composition from one period to another period to another period. It was not really an invention. Chromatism, it was not an invention that had to do with Wagner, mm-hmm. And the era of Debussy and Ravel and Satie and everything. Look what is happening in France at this time, in Paris, with all of these intellectuals, having these conversations. I think that they were at the home of a very famous poet that I don't remember right now, a woman, and all of them got together, including Stravinsky, and all of them were conversing and creating something that nowadays we equate with Impressionism. And in the case of Stravinsky, he opens the door to the dialogue of rhythm in that sense, not because rhythm was being discovered. I mean, rhythm
No,
all over the world.
absolutely. I've always felt that we credit sometimes Stravinsky with this kind of innovation, but really it was just bringing some of the devices of folk music into classical music.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, really true. Somebody is asking a question here. I don't know if you're going to want to answer this. How do you describe your own music?
Ah! I don't know. It's interesting for me to hear that people talk about my music, because I started to be a composer not with that in mind. I thought that I was writing these ballets, it was very practical to do that. I was immersed in that world, and I was the music director of a company, and I was writing these things, but I never thought that it was going to get to this point, that a lot of my musical activity was going to be as a composer, or that I would be writing for orchestras, or that I would be doing an opera or something like that. It was not in my plan, even when I started as a composer. So my music is my music. It's something that after a while, people identify with certain things that they hear that are the Léon sound or whatever, the Léon, for me, I don't know. I don't have any category, because I said, you might hear Peace of Mind such as Inura, which is based on influence of the Brazilian culture. And then you can hear a piece such as Horizons, and you don't know it's the same person, So
Yeah.
into the world of the sound that I want to immerse myself on, and that's what comes out. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, because I think there are composers where there is a recognizable style that carries from one piece to the next, and maybe you have deliberately, or just because it's your nature, had many styles and they form some kind of an overall, but yet these individual aspects are pretty separable or separate. I don't know. It's fascinating, actually. I don't think every good composer is like that.
Well, maybe because of choice, you see.
Yeah.
But the thing is, in my case, it's like when we talk about identity, people say, "What is your identity?" I say, "I don't know, because every day I'm changing." And the thing is that also it refers to maybe this conversation, between us right now is going to make me reflect something differently. I mean, later on this afternoon when I think about it, and some of that I have absorbed, and by tomorrow I'm not the person that I was this morning. So, and this happens when we travel. I mean, in my case, when I travel and I spend some time in another culture, I there's some things that I don't realize that I absorbed, And one of the things that I can tell you is that, for example, when I have been in Cuba visiting family relatives that I still have there, the people in the neighborhood, they ask if I am from Panama or if I am from here. They don't realize I am Cuban born.
That's interesting.
They say that my Spanish is different and that the way that I move is different.
Time has passed. I suppose things change, right?
Exactly.
Amazing. That's amazing.
I mean, language, there's new idiomatic expressions, my Spanish, sounds as though they don't know where to locate it from. My pronunciation is a little bit different now. And I don't notice that.
No.
Because I have been absorbing, and to top it all, the way I move is totally different. The way that I move my arms and everything, is not in the language of the community, you see. And those that don't remember, because I mean, a lot of people have passed or moved or left the country, they have asked my brother, I mean, where's she from? You
That's
know,
great. I
and
like that.
and my brother had to say, this is my sister. She's Cuban. She doesn't live here, but she's Cuban.
I think you've formed a new language and a new way of moving, probably. That's all.
I think that it happens to all of us, because I talk to other
Yeah.
people that have come from different parts of the world, and they have lived here for a while, and they said when they go home, people don't understand
Yeah.
them, or
But that's something beautiful too, isn't it? That is a kind of globalization. You've become the result of all those experiences and all those travelings and collaborations and musical experiences. And so it all comes out into something that isn't the same as where you started. I think that makes sense. It's good.
Yeah, I think that all of us, and besides that, you know, I mean, it's not that I am a romantic, you know, about life and things like that, but, you know, we are a species, just like that dogs are a species, or fishes are a species. And, you know, I mean, we are a species that, okay, we have the ability to communicate through language, and, you know, I mean, in other words, you know, the most intelligent species in the planet. But we are species in the planet in the middle of nowhere in the universe. So I don't understand, you know, why we have to actually complicate something that is so natural, you know, and it doesn't matter how we look like. We all have a heart. We all have veins and arteries, and you know, eyes and nose, and you know, I mean, and so all of the things that we are trying to constantly make as a reference, that yes, we are the same, but we are different, because I mean, we have different experiences as we grow up, and our choices, you see. But there's not so much difference between, we all have hair, we all have skin, we all have, you know, teeth, you know. Yeah. So it doesn't matter.
It is a moment in our world where people are thinking a lot about the lack of diversity that there has been in, especially in music, and a lot of attention is being given, I think, to reassessing, reconsidering how we might be able to come up with something that is more equitable, that is less exclusionary, less racist, less sexist. And how do you look at that now? Because it is true that in the past, I'm sure that you've encountered some resistance, some moments where you felt like, either because of your background or the fact that you were a woman, that there was some resistance to your music. How have you dealt with that? You seem so positive always. I'm very impressed by that. But if you want to talk about this, I would really appreciate it.
Because precisely what I was saying before, I have always loved in fact, one of the things that I told my family, among all the things I was going to be when I grew up, is that I was going to be an astronaut. Why? Because I love the universe. I love thinking about the fact that, yeah, we look at the sky, what we call the sky is space. And if we have light, it's because the sun, you know, we're revolving around the sun, you know, and why do we have night? And when do we have day? And why do we have winter? And you know, all of that is fascinating and a mystery. Because, I mean, we have never left the planet. You know, they're talking about now that in 25, 50 years, you know, man will be actually flying to different places. And that's why there's so much fascinating about UFOs, because some things have happened here that nobody have been able to explain, you know, and who knows if there's other civilizations that have visited us or are visiting us, and we are not aware of, or some of us are not aware of, and some people know about, you know. So therefore, I mean, that is always something that has fascinated me. So therefore, in terms of course, I'm older now, and I have a better consciousness of what I want to say. But that's why, you know, I don't understand these type of friction among human beings, first of all, we talk about diversity. We have always been diverse, you know? We have always looked different. We have always have different cultures. We have always been migrants, you know? Because, I mean, that's the reason why all of a sudden the people from Peru, they look a little bit like the Japanese people, you see? And, you know, before we had jets and all of the means of transportation right now, men walk the earth, or if not, they took a boat and they went from one place to the other, you know? And the continents were much more connected. And there were actually expeditions that came through the north and crossed into the Americas. And what happened? Christopher Columbus, 1492, came here and said, oh, I discovered. No, he didn't discover anything. There were people here, there were civilization here. So in other words, the thing is that for us to be discussing diversity nowadays, we're late because we have been diverse all along, you see? And all of this, in my case, I mean, and this is my humble opinion, all of these fights that we have against each other, and this belongs to me, or this is my country, or this is my culture, or this is, you know, I don't know why. When everything is a contribution to mankind, to society, every language is a contribution, every race actually is one form of a human being. Human beings don't look the same. And all these concepts that have been created instead in terms of race, it's crazy. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy, because that doesn't mean that you are more intelligent or you are less intelligent, or because you are taller and somebody is short. You know, I mean, that's the skeleton of that person. What is that person going to do? You know? Yeah. So we're always looking for something to debate each other, and I don't know why.
In classical music, I am worried a little, though, that some of the pieces that many of us have loved so much, the music of Beethoven, that maybe this music comes out of societies that were so stratified, so exclusionary, and, you know, often based on social values that we just don't like the idea of anymore, that we can't accept anymore. And is it possible for us to separate those cultural products from those social structures that we don't like?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, every time I think about Beethoven, Bach, and all those people, I said, poor Beethoven, you know, he was just a composer. He was a violist with a string quartet, looking for gigs, you know, because he didn't have that much money. True. And he was writing pieces his way. We have made out of him, I don't know, a god. You see? But, oh my God. Just 1 second.
Absolutely.
I can talk right now. I am on a Zoom. I'll talk to you. That's it.
Very good. Thank you.
And I have that because of the alarm thing that I told you.
I know. We understand you may have to step away for a minute.
But going back to Beethoven, you know, I mean, Beethoven, when he wrote his music, he didn't call it classical. It was his music. You see what I mean? And Beethoven was not writing for a king or a queen. Beethoven was writing his music. And in a society that he himself had problems with, because when you study the Eroica, at first he admired Napoleon, and at the end, he can't take it. You see? So he, in a way, was an activist in that piece. And, you know, these cultures that we call cultures that were above other cultures, it's by definition, and also it's a concept. A culture is a culture, and if that is what in that part of the world they wanted to do, that doesn't mean that what was going on in Africa or in China was different. So in other words, we gave it the value in a way, you see,
Mm-hmm.
that they actually inherited. And besides that, we have always have a problem in terms of who has the most money. What is the country that has the most money? But when you come to think about all this, sadly, through history, all of these places at a given time or try or were, in a way, empires.
Yeah.
And when you go to Italy and you go next to the Colosseum, you see in the map how much power Italy had at one point that dominated almost a big portion of Europe.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we have been fighting for power, and power means, my culture is better, this is better than the other one. We have the money, you don't have the money, you're a minority, you are a majority. I mean, and unfortunately, we are born with a destination, and that means we all disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is why I have been able to navigate things by thinking things like that, and in a way, not allowing anybody that tells me what should I do. I mean, how come somebody's going to tell me what I should do?
Yeah.
You see, so that is, that's why I am always optimist.
You are always optimistic, and that's makes all of us more optimistic. I think you just said something interesting about how you're aware that everyone's going to disappear. When you're writing music, are you aware, or are you thinking about whether it's going to have a long future, or are you more interested in what the reaction of listeners is going to be right now?
Well, I think that it would have been just like, I'm not going to compare, but Beethoven, when he wrote his pieces, he didn't know he was going to become so famous. You see, right now, I am in a very special spot right now, and I am totally astonished. I said, but wait a minute. I mean, some people are playing some pieces I played 20 years ago and say, oh, this piece is so incredible. And I was thinking, I don't know. Why are you reacting this way? I mean, years ago, you heard the same piece and it was not so incredible at that moment. You know what I mean? So, in other
Absolutely.
words, our perception, and I don't know if my music is going to last forever like these other. But nowadays, I don't think that anybody lasts forever as the kind of podium that we have given to Beethoven, Brahms, and Schubert, and I mean, it's totally different. The scenario is very different.
I wonder sometimes if that's a very good way of measuring anything, though. There have been some of these online discussions about what pieces from our own time will still be played in 100 years or something like that. And I often think it might be more important to notice which pieces are going to be really appreciated in the moment they're made. So maybe I don't care so much about 100 years from now.
Me neither. I mean,
you do bring up something else, though, and I have to say I'm so thrilled for all of your amazing successes of the last years. And when I first knew you, you were already well known around New York and people were playing your music. But in the last few years, it's been just an incredible outpouring from many people. You won the Pulitzer Prize, you got this incredible Kennedy Center honor. Do you think that this kind of recognition actually changes the way you can compose? Is there something different, or do you try to keep going on in the same way?
No, I don't let any of these things go to my head. No. First of all, both the Kennedy and the Pulitzer were surprised. In fact, when the Pulitzer was announced, I was in the dentist. I didn't know that was happening. And the one that have to tell me was Frank Oteri, another composer that you and I know very well.
That's great.
Frank is the one that said, Tania, you don't know what's going on. I said, what happened? congratulations. I mean, he had me about 5 minutes toying with me, not telling me what happened. And then when he told me, he said, no, impossible. I mean, and the same thing happened with the Kennedy Center, and I got the call. For a certain reason, these things is happening. I mean, it's nothing that I apply for or put my name on or something like that. I mean, the powers that be, or those that are in power, are the ones that make the choice. And I'm very grateful about the whole thing, about that, and
well deserved.
Thank you so much. But again, I don't know. Apparently, the only thing that I would say is that when the Kennedy Center, and that we get to meet the president or the whole thing, I mean, and I was in the middle of the whole thing saying, maybe this was my destiny, because I was supposed to be in France. I was supposed to be in Paris, and look what happened, So that's the only thing that I could think of. But nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And when I come home, after all of that glitter, and it's me, and I still put my salsa and dance with the broom,
Well, I think as long as you can continue to do that, then everything is fine.
I think so.
I have a question from somebody in the group here, and it's a very open question. What advice do you have for students?
Oh my God. The only advice that I can tell you is follow your dreams. Follow your dreams, because I'm telling you, when I said that I thought this is my destiny, or this was my destiny, something that I was very surprised with, finding myself where I was, is that I had a revelation, when I was 9 years old. And that's when I told my family I was going to live in Paris. And of course, I come from a very poor family, and they laugh at me because they said, how is she going to fly out of here? The thing is that I continue with that dream, and that's the dream that put me in the plane. And rather than going to Paris, I came here because it was actually the only trip that was facilitated to me at that time. And I didn't know I was going to stay here, and I was going to one day be speaking to you, I mean, from this type of situation and experiences that I have lived since my arrival. But the dream was that, I lived in an island and I wanted to see the world. And I don't know, fate have actually given me the possibility of doing that. So if you think that you can be an astronaut, go for it. I mean, if you want to be a composer, go for it. You want to be a skater, as a ice skater, anything you want to do, because life is what we have in our hands right now, and you are just beginning your journey. And you never know how you could contribute to make this species of this planet better, which is actually what many, many of us are trying, regardless of all the disasters that you hear that are going on in the planet. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We don't have much time left, but I want to ask you one impossible question. Sometimes in your music, there's a very intense expression of human feelings, I think. And I'm always wondering, in pieces that don't have words, no texts, just instrumental music, how is it that musical sound communicates emotion to us?
Well, I have no idea, Maestro. I have no idea. One thing that I can tell you is about writing my pieces. If I don't feel the piece, I know that the piece is not right, or whatever I'm putting together is not right. Yes, I have all that knowledge, that we were talking about craftsmanship, but I have to feel something. And that is what really, really manipulates my hand, because I still write, paper and pencil. And I don't know, it's something. It's something. It's like, it's me, but it's not me. It's the other me that is in charge at that moment and tells me, do this, And I am surprised because sometimes when I hear it, I still get the feeling that I felt when I was writing it. So I know that at least for me, it's right. It might not be right for some other people. It doesn't matter. But that's the honesty of actually delivering something that comes from your soul. Let me put it that way. And I think that if you talk to everybody that manifests anything, why Madame Curie became who she was, why Martin Luther King, said what he said, and why, I don't know, Baryshnikov became who he was.
And what's the answer?
The answer is that it's something that comes from inside. It's not something that you think, I'm going to do this because, this is going to make me really, really very famous. No. If you talk to most of all of these different people and study their lives, you will realize that there was a moment in their life where they made a choice that actually came from their heart. And that is the one that works. So I am very grateful that my grandmother realized that I had something to do with these sounds. I'm the first musician in my family. And the thing is that I think that she saw something or that, I don't know, gave her the impetus to get me to a conservatory. And she doesn't exist. She died 4 years after I arrived in the United States, but at least she knew already that I was part of the Dance Theater of Harlem. And I was doing something that was important because it was the first company in the world that demonstrated that people of color could dance ballet. So therefore, did I know that I was going to get involved with something like that? No. It was just, it happened. I cannot even talk about destiny because I don't know what that is, but it happened. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We're very glad that she got you to that conservatory. And we're very glad that we had this opportunity to revolve around your son for a short time. Thank you, Tania Léon, so much for doing this. And we're looking forward to hearing more of your music right away.
And thank you, Bruce. I hope I'd see you in person again.
Me too.
We have been apart from each other.
It's a long time.
Years. My God.
I know.
So I'm very happy that we're doing this even this way.
Yes, okay? Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
All the best, Tania.
Yeah. All right, great.